Welcome to the podcast of Data and Analytics in Business. We will learn from the leading industry experts using data and analytics to solve the problems and create values in practice. We will also learn where the industry is heading to and how data and analytics will shape the industry in the future. Most importantly, how they are preparing their business for digital transformation and disruption in the future. I'm your host, Jason Tan, and thank you for listening. So this episode is an interview with Peter Gurrie. He is the Experience Service Director of APAC at IVE Group. In this episode, we actually will talk a lot about the customer experience and how do we build the customer experience using data and analytics. And I suppose the use of the data and analytics here is very much to amplify and take the customer experience to very much to another level, and how and why it is so essential in the customer experience from the view of the personalization. Peter was trained in fine arts with painting, and I actually think that background is really an important cornerstone and a very, very unique aspect that he brings to his career, and also all the business venture that he has been involved in also helping his client in building experience. So enjoy the discussion that I have got with Peter in using data and analytics to build customer experience through personalization. And as always, please feel free to reach out if you have any question for me or Peter. Send us a voice message through the link in the post. Hi, Peter. Welcome to the show. Been talking to you about this to come to the show, and it's wonderful to have you to the show to talk about how to use data and analytics to redefine the customer experience.
Well, thank you very much, mate. Very much looking forward to this, and I've enjoyed working with you today. So it's a good topic of discussion, and I hope to bring something new to the topic and maybe offer a few points of challenge that those listening to this are able to stop and think about in maybe a new perspective. And because data and analytics in particular is a very broad and multifaceted topic. So yeah, let's have a real crack at impressing some people, eh?
Absolutely. I think offering the news perspective is what it's all about, i.e. how data and analytics are used in so many different ways and so many different industries to improve the customer experience, to improve for the business. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna start the question in a bit of unusual way, but I think it's a very important one, because from what I research is from the very beginning and from the academic perspective, you were trained at Victorian College of the Arts. And I feel like this has still a very good foundation from the artistic perspective that you could bring into the customer experience and also the media aspect. So what did you study at VCA?
Well, I've followed a path that very few, I would suggest, in those who focus on data anyway, very few travel. Started, like you suggested, at VCA, Victorian College of the Arts. There, I practiced painting, printmaking, etc. And the studios were located at the Victorian National Gallery. And it's quite a privileged school, definitely one that promotes thought and real critique. And I think that's the relevance, the idea of critique. I took my fine art to a point where, strangely, I was funding my fine art tuition by doing a bit of commercial art off of the side, traditional designing logos and all that sort of thing. And it seemed to be far more profitable, and I very quickly went down the path of, the commercial side of it. And while I've kept my fine art as a passion, I still produce work, I still exhibit. That is with me in parallel, as opposed to the two being entwined now. And I've firmly got my professional career as being one that focuses on the utilisation of data through insight and action. But what the VCA has brought me is harsh critique of an artist. And an artist doesn't necessarily just accept. An artist is there to push boundaries and really push concepts to a new area where they're probably not ready to go. And that is the name of the artist, to be a dissident or whatever. But as a commercial creative, where I became an art director and then a creative director, I was probably more focused on, well, why are we doing this? I know I've got to make it pretty and I've got to make it palatable, but you can only make certain things palatable if they're believable, or, as it's so popular when people talk about personalisation, if they're relevant. So underline the word relevant, underline the word what is the value here. More often than not, I felt I was putting lipstick on a pig. And that's what VCA brought to my current career, this constant critique of, well, what is the value?
The constant critique is a very good point. I think it's very important to constantly asking the question, why are we doing this and why are we doing that? And that is really fundamental to get the things right. One of the past guests of my podcast, Shah, just suggests that the data science is art meeting the science. I suppose...
Well, to a degree, yeah. But there's a balance. Commercial funds the story, but the customer ultimately is the boss, and you've got to understand both perspectives. It's got to make money for the bigwigs, but it's also got to, there can't be a disconnect between the customer, the need, and when you answer that, there's got to be a practical conversation as a business as to what the cost of that is. How feasible is it? How maintainable is it? What is it from a profitable perspective? It's a large set of considerations that go into this idea of critique.
And I think even when it comes to define arts, that critique and that understanding of the commercial value is equally important, whether the artist is the one who will consider and thinking about all those commercial value or not. It's not, but at least someone, usually if we look at a lot of those successful fine art, they tend to have someone behind the background doing all those sort of critique. So I'm going to move on to the next question. So that led you to have a career in the commercial side of the arts and start delving into the working as an online agency to help the customer experience. What was your favorite campaign in this period of your career?
I'm going to go right back to the beginning. So about 20 years ago. I did it. I aged myself considerably. But yes, 20 years ago, I worked on a campaign, which at the time was exceptionally well promoted. It was a national campaign for a car brand called the Barina, which is, I believe, still in market by Holden. And they were very much tapping into a young market, going from a shift from being a very girly little car to just universally city cool and uber relevant to both fashionable young men and women. And Cummins, we worked with a young brand or young agency at the time called Cummins, which now have grown substantially. One of the early successes was this campaign of theirs where they brought a concept to life, the Barina FM. And we won as the digital agency, the digital creative and analytics agency, we won the pitch to be their Cummins partner. And what we brought to life was the Barina FM concept via our website. And the first that we know of in the world of idiots producing an actual online streaming radio station for a commercial brand. And obviously Holden loved it, Cummins loved it, and we were the silly ones to suggest it. So we had to go and deliver, and with it was bleeding edge sort of challenges. we had to, our pitch was an analytics and a creative experience pitch. The creative experience was immersive, i.e. we were going to bring high quality music to the work days and lives of people, and therefore the brand was connected to them. Really good, i.e. brand experience for those considering maybe a car. But we also wanted to show what the effect of that experience was on sales and sales leads to the dealership. So analytics was a very part of this. And you've got to remember, this is 20 years ago. So the same challenges brands face now were exaggerated in the sense that we had to literally ask ourselves, well, how can we track the dealer? And how can we track the string? How can we track the level of engagement? So all those things were part of what I say bleeding edge, because we had to rather painfully solve these problems. And we were working right up to the deadline to deliver this solution. But thankfully, we were rewarded for it. We were awarded so many online advertising and creative awards. But yeah, I remember it because I still face these challenges now, in the sense that what we were shaping all the way back then, which was an immersive experience that had relevance, deeply appreciated and obviously valued by its audience, but we also had to prove it. And hence the other side of the story of digital coming in, where we really needed to show, well, the ROI is this. And most businesses still don't achieve the architecture required to define an ROI of a campaign to a definitive degree, because there's so many moving bits and pieces behind a campaign and behind a business's promotion that affect sales and affect activity. It's hard to isolate them.
Would you say that tracking, or maybe what would you say that in this period of your career is defining the foundation of what you were subsequently doing in the years later in coming to build the business and the career about customer experience for the large corporation?
Well, customer experience, let's just look at what customer experience is for a moment.
That's great. I think we should have a good definition of what customer experience is for the benefit of myself and audience. I think that is yes, please.
Because customer experience can be misinterpreted or used in very specific ways, namely customer for starters, but what that can discriminate against is the experience that leads up to becoming a customer, so the prospect experience. Now, I'd like to consider that still part of a customer experience, and that you're a prospective customer, and the better brand is the one that supports you through a decision-making process in the most efficient and reassuring manner, mitigates any level of confusion or anxiety the best way possible, and ultimately achieves your trust and converts you to becoming a customer. If it's either a consumer product, or a higher consideration service-related product, like a banking product, finance product, or a telecommunications product, whatever, they are, in my mind, part of the customer experience. The world, others might beg to differ, could be easily debated, but in my mind, the most succinct way to describe it is brand experience. And the overarching brand experience has a pre-customer and a post-commitment facet, and customer experience is being one that heavily focuses on the engaged and retained customer. But yeah, I just wanted to share with that. I suppose it's a muddy water for the audience, but bear in mind, brand is probably the best thing to consider in this respect, because it overarches both of them quite succinctly. Now, your question was what laid the foundation, or if I'm correct, you're saying what started all the way back when that has kind of shaped where I am now? Is that
correct? Yeah.
It has been largely an ROI focus for me. That critique that I talked about isn't lip service. how you use information around you to best possibly inform an idea or a decision, how you architect your testing to critique even yourself and your assumptions, how do you create a measurement or an analytical environment that provides clarity on that success. All these small things that were little considerations, and they started off as little considerations because 20 years ago, success was delivering something to market. Success was a big multi-channel campaign going to market, and the measurement of success was, in Barina FM sense, product sales. Pure and simple. There was never really any critique yet again on could we have gotten more? Did we drive enough leads? And was it a failing of a massive lead volume and a failure of a conversion to leads? Should we have got more sales because of something? I think that has been the area of growth. The question of what could this have been and how could it have been better? What was the healthy funnel all the way through? So instead of just a target of 15% increase in sales, start to set targets of 15% increases in sales. Therefore, up the funnel, there's another target. Up the funnel further, there's another target. And your analytics becomes a little more surgical. Whereas you ran a campaign and it finished and you went, yay, it was a success or not. Now you're watching it more incrementally and you're saying, well, we expected at this point the upper funnel, so i.e. level of interest across all our digital touch points, hypothetically, to be this. We're behind on that. What can we do? So you get to control the outcome more readily now. But that framework of analytics that I mentioned started off all the way back when, and it's been incrementally improved.
Right. So in 2009, you started JBA with James Bennett and grew it to a 60-person company. So what prompted you? I suppose my question is, what prompted you and James to partner with Exact Target and focus on email back at that time? Now, just a note for the benefit of the audience, Exact Target is now part of Salesforce and is known as the Salesforce Marketing Cloud.
Mm-hmm. Now, I suppose this is a good continuance where Barina FM and that early history was where a lot of those in the digital industry were focused on what was called pure play, which is building of mainly website experiences and content. Email, and part of the success criteria was, well, okay, you build it and they will come. No, they don't. Above the line advertising started to support by putting URLs, or should I say, just tags on interstitials or anything that they possibly could, be it online or in TV, so driving people via above the line. But channels such as email were also important to driving repeat visitation and awareness, from paid lists all the way through to member-acquired lists by these brands. But for us, the reason why we partnered with Exact Target was that there was a perception that there was a need for more personalised experiences, and at the time, building great big websites and personalising them was a difficult task, and therefore the email became something that you could consider the geography of a person, you could consider whether they were a customer or a prospect, whether they were referred to. There was very simple levels of contextual personalisation that happened all the way back then that helped. And more importantly, it was easier, and that we understood already that email was showing its role in the marketing mix as being an influencer because it was purely long format. People were really enjoying reading and getting engaged in relevant content that was arriving at their inbox, which was far more convenient and top of mind than remembering to go back to a website. And that I think the most important thing, we're hyper aware that many brands were doing it wrong and tripping over their shoelaces in trying to achieve certain outcomes, and that when partnering with someone like Exact Target, who brought to life this idea of simplified personalisation all the way back when, we realised that there was a partnership there that could benefit them and benefit us. Us readily working with brands and bringing it to life in a creative and business sense. Them innovating the experience in the platform and around and to the end user. But there's another irony. 10 years later, having become a global platinum partner with Salesforce itself and Marketing Cloud and innovating uphill and down dale, the market, however, is still struggling with some of those early concepts of what personalisation is and how a business creates meaningful content that doesn't get lost in the mix. But that's pretty much why those partnerships are relevant, ExactTarget, and they're not the only ones. ExactTarget and Salesforce, accompanied by emerging platforms like MailChimp, who are becoming very, very complex compared to what they used to be years ago. Adobe Stack has got a lot of very powerful tools within it. There's a lot going on, but we chose ExactTarget because they were one of the first innovators.
I could see there are benefit of choosing an emerging player. Often they a little bit more aggressive, and I think that could be always a good option. Now, we are getting on average 200 emails a day, and I have pretty much unsubscribed all of them. So my question for you is, could email still work in today's world? And if so, how do you make it work in 2020 and going forward?
It's absolutely critical, but I'm going to say I get frustrated, but I also understand the needs of certain brands and certain products that feel they need to tell people about their product via email. But let's pick on something that is going to be an extreme example. Nobody should be expected to sign up to a regular toothbrush brand website and expect to receive the latest information on toothbrushing. Now, it's a stretch to say that dental hygiene is important. Do you want to hear about it via the email channel constantly? You could describe some real genuine value for people with very specific dental needs. And I've just picked a topic out of my head for an example. But the point here is relevance. There might be certain people, such as dentists, or certain people with very specific dental needs that might subscribe to very specific content. But that doesn't mean that everybody in Australia should be expected to sign up to something about toothbrushes. But a lot of brands have that idea. I'm a brand. I therefore need to be present. I need to be communicating. I need to drive interest and demand. There's many ways of doing it, but in my opinion, some brands should just stick to promotional marketing, shelf competitiveness, on-site decision-making or on-premise decision-making is still a big influencer for certain types of brands. That would reduce a lot of clutter. And when you say, 200 brands or 200 emails a day, I dare say you filter those out based on relevance, right? Some of them you've been entered into competitions and therefore legally, Big Bunny is you're being communicated to, but not ethically or not responsibly. So brands all the way up the tree have to understand that there's a relevance and there's an obligation. Now, if you're providing genuine need and genuine advantage, addressing need and providing advantage, you're less likely going to be filtered. Now, there's technically massive changes happening. Businesses are still fighting very hard to personalise, and that's happening. So personalisation is then the expectation of the email channels, like we said 10 years ago and more. But products like Google's dynamic email changes that idea of personalised again by adding another layer of context to it. Like emails will become more relevant based on the content within changing over time. So if you open an email Tuesday, its content will be different based on if you open the same email Friday and you've done some subsequent things since, like you've gone and purchased something, so therefore there might be a thank you, or that product will be missing from the you might also like section. There's context that is now moving into email. And again, it's easier to do it there, being in an environment that is very reliant, such as a web environment or an app environment that is hyper-reliant on technical development streams. That's where things slow down a little bit still. So email, if it does what it's meant to do and be relevant, is still very powerful. But like you say, there's a lot of noise out there. Therefore, the perception is that it can be not relevant because it's not valuable to most.
And I think that what a lot of people may or may not be aware is that how often you open an email that is being sent to you, at what time you are open, and what exactly do you do when you open the email, whether you click the link or not.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things are effectively tracked. And a lot of those activities you do within the email itself is data. The large company, like, for example, Pinterest or the bigger guys, they probably will build a lot of those analytics themselves. But at the same time, the smaller guys, or in most organizations, they can actually use the platform that is already ready, available from the market to do a lot of those things. And that is where the analytic coming into play. That is where the data coming into the play. And hence, we'll be able to take the marketing and the email personalization and the customer experience to another level, instead of just blindly sending 3 promotional email 3 times a week. Would that be the right way to describe this whole data and analytic? Is the science, is the analytic behind this email personalization and customer experience?
Yeah, well, we're trying to replicate an art with science, but meaning, I should explain that a little further. We're trying to replicate the art, the true art of good service and intuitive contact, such as a premium salesperson in a boutique salon will always provide space but be intuitive enough to help and provide extreme value and extreme knowledge. You see this when you go into a place like Dan Murphy's. The art is to use analytics and what we understand. Well, the science is using what we understand that a person would naturally extract in a very artful and personable manner. The science is more, how do we turn what we see and what we can track into an experience and insight, or insight and then ultimately experiences. But it's bloody hard. And that's the thing. Its platforms have made a very big, for many years now, made a very big deal about the perceived ease of certain things. If it was so easy, more businesses would have been a lot more successful in painting very clear pictures and then ultimately responding to those clear pictures efficiently. More often, there's still a very large gap between the depth of insight that's produced and the frequency in which that insight is produced and the ability to deliver that insight to market. I mentioned before, very large platforms and systems rely on technical delivery. Those technical delivery streams run at high cost, therefore can only be so many people, so therefore the speed of delivery is only so fast. And then at some point, someone asks themselves, should we even deliver this yet? Because surely it'll be outdated by the time we deliver it. So, look, what you're talking about, analytics, yes. It's the big question is still the operational delivery of not only analytics, but what comes from it.
Correct.
Does that make sense? Did that answer your question?
It does. Now, you sold the business to IVE Group in 2016. Can you please tell us a bit more about IVE Group and what's the role that you play at IVE Group now?
Yeah. I'll start at the IVE Group level. IVE are a very large business with its history rooted in print and direct mail. The reason why we sold to IVE was what we saw in them in the future. We were I suppose, pursued by a number of business, from agencies to consultancy groups. But why IVE was different is they control a very, very large portion of the nation's print needs, and they also control a large amount of marketing product needs. Now, for them, we were a necessary item. I like to, I'm speaking personally here, it's not as the group's perception, but I like to put our business being the data fuel. I saw it as being at the hub of their service offering, because as print evolves, it's going to become more surgical. Print is going through change, well and truly. It can't continue to be that spray and pray. And the information that is acquired on broader campaigns that allows them to be optimised, the information that allows direct mail to be better supported by other touch points is critical. That feeds turns multi-channel into omni-channel. They are a very large multi-channel player that has the ability to be an omni-channel player. And I think that's the future of the group. As data is absorbed into what has been relatively traditional channels and products, the group as a whole will become significantly more strategically placed to have relationships with clients and cost effectively drive sales for those clients. And we live in a world where multi-channel is purely trying to race towards omni-channel very quickly, and it's groups like IVE that will be able to do it.
Thanks for the explanation about the IVE Group. So I learned that they actually have just acquired some marketing solution, and again, it is also a printing, similar to printing business, and they are more of a catalog distribution and letterbox delivery business. Now, I suppose the question I have is, given that most people are talking about online and digital, how do you think such acquisition or maybe the printing marketing would still be relevant going forward?
This is important to, I probably think, the previous question as well. Part of your question before was, what was my role? My role sat across innovation and the more human aspects and the more operational and process aspects of planning, designing, and delivery of increasingly more informed multi-channel campaigns and beginning that omni-channel journey. And one of the biggest opportunities is for certain types of retailers to looking at their catalogue production and those high volume catalogue printing. How can they be more surgical with the placement and costing of those catalogues? Because big retailers know, or certain types of retailers know, catalogues work, but it's in a very superficial sense. We know when we do a catalogue drop around this geo area that footfall to our stores within that geo area, they go up. Sometimes they go up, depending on the season, 15%. But they see it working. Fair enough. The analytics isn't as sophisticated as it could be because it's rather direct connected to sales and footfall, and there's a lot of other things going on in tandem. But they're pretty sure because they've tested it by removing those catalogues from the market and they see a drop, right? So there's a very superficial understanding, but it's a pretty convincing one that they bloody well work. So catalogues are proven. The question is, how can they be more cost effective? How can they be more environmentally relevant too, well and truly? I suppose that's a different discussion. But this is where the improvement of them is where online experiences to accompany the catalogue, bringing virtual reality into the catalogue, well, not virtual, augmented, I should say, bringing the changing room into a catalogue via an app that augments the content of the app with someone's profile, that's very powerful, and we're not far from that. It's just trial and error and a little bit of data connectivity quality that is going to allow that to be more readily available to brands.
And this is probably the very much needed change that people need to bring to the print material and the print material marketing, right? I.e., how do you connect that offline of the marketing in the print catalog, and how do you track it, and how do you bring them to secondly and integrate them with all the online and digital channel that the brand have been building, isn't it?
Yeah, well and truly. There's certain things that aren't going to go anywhere. There's others that may, but like outdoor as a static media will change very quickly to be one that heavily engages with those around it. But yeah, you can expect the same from other traditional above-the-line channels as well.
You spoke a lot about omni-channel. There's something that I pick up. And for my benefit or the benefit of the audience, could you please define what is omni-channel?
It is, there's a lot of critique. Oh, no, not critique. That was, I've got critique on the brain. There's a lot of confusion around multi-channel versus omni-channel. Multi-channel has been around since Puss was a kitten, and it simply is it is where a lot of national or large campaigns are rolled out nationally, and orchestrated within that campaign is the timely delivery across multiple channels of that campaign, and they largely sing to the same song. There's a very core proposition that proposition is maybe slightly contextually altered based on the destination, but ultimately there's no real alignment horizontally. It's all columns, right? Some might have a direct response built into them. Some might be just purely awareness driving, but that's multi-channel. Omni-channel is where you start to build a horizontal. And this is where personalisation, analytics informs and data profile building, anonymous understanding of a person and a known understanding of a prospect or a customer. These types of things and the behavioural journey that exists within the campaign itself provide context and changes the nature of the journey within the campaign. For example, if I have interacted with an ad, if I have been exposed to a display ad and click to a landing page, that will be recognised, and say somebody does receive an email to follow, or they do go in store and digitally interact with a tool at retail and connect their profile. All these connected touch points are responding at a high rate of frequency to the journey. So the high rate of frequency basically means it's updated daily, weekly, hourly, minutely, but whatever the relevance is, but you are a different person by the time you reach the different destination within that campaign journey. So the same silos might exist, same channels, like the same multi-channels might exist, but the way those channels are used are very different, and they're meant to be personalised. Now, a lot of people talk about the utopian view of this because it's really quite powerful and it's a wonderful place to end up. The ability to do it, it's still the topic of global case studies where handfuls of people dragged up on stage to Adobe or a Salesforce global forum and cite limited examples where they've gone and achieved this omni-channel view. The desire, our eyes are still bigger than our bellies, and part of the challenge at the moment is to bring more omni-channel to life. And a lot of skills have to change, and a lot of platforms and processes need to change in order to achieve that.
And this is where the data and analytic coming into play, right, for that whole customer experience and branding and marketing. I suppose how for the people who are not familiar how to do this sort of thing, how do you infuse data and analytics in building a better customer experience?
First, a business needs to realize the value in what they're building. The amount of executives that I've worked with invest somewhat, not blindly. They know they need to invest, but how much, what the expectation is, they seek to get clarity on what the outcome is. Few are provided it. It's rather anecdotal or aggregate. I think there needs to be strong understanding of what the business outcomes are with respect to data quality, what the commitment level is on a business to maintain it. That includes governance and the cost of maintaining governance around quality of attribution within analytics environments. Is that attribution in place to understand and be used as a tool for you as a business? Is your taxonomy, which is your tagging structure, is it being regularly reviewed in line with the sophistication of your testing program and your campaign program? It's no point putting a very complex campaign to market in a very personalized sense if your analytics taxonomy or your analytics environment, measurement environment isn't able to report at that same level efficiently. So there's a lot that needs to happen in concert to achieve successful tactical outcomes. If you look at the customer's touch point, there's platforms, there's people, there's processes that have to incrementally be assessed and evolved in tandem with each other for the customer experience to improve. If you do just the customer end, you'll still be blind. And if you don't resource your business to evolve, your return on investment will not be refined. You'll rely too heavily on external parties to support you in your journey. So there's a lot to consider. And again, this is when the critique we spoke about comes in. What is the right platform? What is the right pace? And what is the acceptable business brand experience? All of those have to be looked at in tandem.
There is another terminology often being used, and that is called customer analytics. And it is very different to customer experience. At the same time, it is really the cornerstone to customer experience. If you will have to explain to someone who is not familiar with both of these, can you please explain or help me to explain to executives, say, how would the customer analytics can be used to complement the customer experience?
Yep, good one. I suppose experience in itself, let's look at that. Customer experience and customer analytics, they're directly entwined, like I was saying. What I was saying before is just as relevant to this point. Analytics is due for massive change. Customer experience is the discipline of understanding an experience that the customer needs, identifying gaps or inefficiencies within it or points of anxiety within it. And like we said at the very beginning, I like to think of customer experience as more brand experience and the one that encompasses the faith building and trust building of a prospect of becoming a customer and the customer as they go through their life cycle, the natural life cycle. Now, customer analytics is an environment which has web or online and offline measurement, building a framework that informs the experience design, pure and simple. But the experience is our desire for the experience is getting incredibly complex, like I've been saying. If we were to personalize at the desired level where brands are hoping to be, the task for analytics and measurement alone is enormous. Analytics, customer analytics, is the expectation is it has to change. I look at it and think, well, how on earth, if we're to have an omni-channel campaign with many, many variants of content and many, many tests, how on earth is analysis going to be performed? How is that automated? How is that? How are the tools passing the right data to the right people? Clearly, there's those that need extremely granular detail. Clearly, there's people that do not need that detail but need more a dot on the wall as an indicator of health. But this is where analytics is. It's got to solve the problem of scalability, and it's got to solve the problem of complexity and continual change. That's not a small task. I honestly saw analytics. We were a business that started off where we helped our clients get rapid sales changes through direct response channels, and that means through online sales and direct, say, call. We built analytics environments that inform our decisions very quickly, but once we built those analytics of the web and once we built those tools, client very quickly took the analytics discipline inside and owned it. I think there's going to be a point where the internal team will rely on an external team again to help it overcome this massive personalisation hurdle, where new tools, new processes are adopted in exchange for a new version of an internal structure where automation has been achieved and a new team and skill sets can be adopted. But I can't see that being done by too many businesses in isolation or on their own. So it's going to bust again. It's going to boom out where a new style of analytics business emerges, one that's very close to the solving of the problem of personalisation. And over a period of maybe 2 to 5 years, that same consolidation and internal function will resume, but in a different, looking altogether different.
Thanks for that. Now, I have an interesting question for you. I see that 20, 25 years, 30 years ago, a lot of the marketing is very much above the line. Above the line meaning TV advertising, radio advertising, or even newspaper advertising. But the span of the marketing is now shifting at a very high speed towards the direct response platform, i.e. the Google ad, the Facebook ad, or Instagram. And now, the interesting thing, I suppose, where I observe is that, as a result of this shifting of the marketing spend, are we going to see any reduction of those interesting and funny ads on TV? Because the changes of the medium and also the works on those different medium is equally changed. So, do you think a reduction and or maybe it would be a comeback for this sort of creative media, the interesting and funny ad coming back, but it will be on the digital direct response world?
Over the last 10 years, there's been a progressive move from above the line investment in advertising to more digital channels. There's been a slow progression, and that's going to continue. I would be distraught to think that those beautiful moments where some brand, some creative is able to really tap into its audience and create something that is really memorable. It's rare. Sometimes it's at the expense of the creative self, where you laugh a big belly laugh, but then wait, what was that can of tuna? What was it? What was that brand? So the creative is maybe the hero a bit too much, but it's not going to disappear. That won't disappear. Brands and the brand experience, I think, are going to go through change, but no brand is ever going to pull back from creating an emotional bond with the customer. What's only going to change is how that becomes more readily personalised. It's early advertising broke through in a very mass sense, but it understood still a consumer need, and that they got real insight and responded to that real insight. And now that insight is several layers deep, and the art and science are coming together. And the challenge is not so much are the skills there. The challenge is the budget there? What is the right budget? What is the right budget to produce multiple variants of something? And that budget is further increased at the moment by a production cost, right? How on earth can these big brand campaigns move deep into personalised and relevant experiences for the multiple variants that are technically possible? How on earth can the production be quantifiably relevant for an ROI? Because at the moment, there's still people producing assets, by and by, it's still people. But the thing that's going to stop, I suppose, the depth of this creative experience is just that, the cost of personalisation. I think any creative would give their right arm to work on something that was infinitely powerful and infinitely personalised. But yeah, how? That's the thing. And that's what brands are struggling with.
You mentioned about the budget. Now, here's the thinking that I have been having over the last 2 years is the cost of advertising on the platform like Google AdWords, which has been increasing steadily over the last 10 years. The same thing is happening already in Facebook ad, because big brands are now spending millions and millions of dollars on these direct response platform like the Facebook ad. What that actually means, though, is going to drive up the cost of bidding. At the same time, it will drive out the smaller business. I mean, what I mean by that is like in 10 years ago, it was a really good platform for the small business to bid on ad, because the big brand are not using it and not buying the ads. So it is going to drive all the smaller player. What would be your advice to the smaller player to say, okay, I could no longer afford to compete with the big brand to advertise on Facebook? Where should I go? What should I do then?
Well, I think there's many ways, and it depends on how you describe this small business and what this small business actually is and why it's going up against the massive players for starters. I might take a few perspectives on this answer. If we're looking at a small business that is has a street presence, a bricks and mortar presence, Facebook ads, Google ads, all this very geo-sensitive targeting is still very relevant. You can target, and if you've got some sort of understanding as to what your proposition is, you can target locally and you can build very successful, highly cost-effective local campaigns via those channels. It's not something that you're going to be excluded on. You just need to understand how to build your brand in those destinations. How do you establish a dictionary or a terminology of your own that works organically? How is that going to be identified as a quality engagement? So are you going to be found? How is that aligned to your paid display? But I mean, I'm getting detailed, but there's no reason why they should be pushed out if they've got a geo view. If you're a small challenger having a swing at the bigger guys and you're finding your terms being highly competitive, the highly competitive terms are typically very broad. Like when you play the game of home loans and real estate and travel and all those very, very competitive industries, you do see very competitive terms. But if someone is challenging you can still build. This is where email comes in. This is where the power of the destination comes in. This is where the power of being a smart omni-channel brand, linking together very simple propositions, but providing a smart email, providing that shapes itself by really relevant segments. Not many segments, but very powerful, relevant ones, and powerfully personalised landing pages. Very succinct and relevant reasons to subscribe to an email base. Connecting apps to these touch points by way of location. Really use your tools smarter than the big guys can't. Know that you can buy a moderately expensive platform. Like I mentioned the word MailChimp before. They are really sharpening their act up, and a challenging brand can use a platform like that and with their own bespoke data tooling to maintain quality to really hit where it hurts the bigger brand that isn't able to be so nimble. So that's the only way I could possibly answer that, and that I think this is where the big platforms are really relevant. The cost of those big platforms is a problem for the middle guy. So looking at your legacy, looking at small, more creative solutions that stick together might be the way to go. But they shouldn't ever be beaten out by the big guys.
I will finish this interview with my usual question. What is one book that you would give it to your younger self? Why?
One book that I would have given my younger self. Can I suggest two?
Yeah, of course.
Right, my younger self. Like, I came across Aldous Huxley's Brave New World in high school, right? So I would have enjoyed reading that as a far younger fella, because it cemented the futurists I've enjoyed reading, and they are incredibly insightful people who understand the human condition. And A Brave New World, for me, when you read it and you understand the time in which it was written, and from memories, I think it was in the 30s, and in late 30s, maybe even 40s. I'd have to go back and check. But Brave New World showed everything that we're hitting today by way of politics and social systems. And I appreciate, and I've always stored an understanding of what futurists use to shape their story. Fair enough, a lot of them are pessimistic, but to shape a brand and to work with clients, to shape a brand and understand that those clients represent a customer, and the customer has intrinsic needs now and in future. You have to be a futurist yourself, and you have to really picture what is possible and what is likely to be adopted, what is likely to be rejected, and why. And that includes, you've got to be a futurist in the market, but also a futurist within the business of the client itself. What's feasible for adoption? What are people going to readily accept by way of new process? What's too aggressive by way of change? So that futurist mindset I've adopted one and found beautiful, and it's led well. And I could have done with a few more years under my belt thinking like that as a younger fella. The other book would be a book that I, for personal reasons, would like to suggest to everybody, and it's Lisa Lang and her book of E.W. Cole's Chasing the Rainbow. That has shaped my life and my idea of ethics. And E.W. Cole, some people might know, wrote a book here in Australia, and it was widely circulated. Every house had one up until probably the late 50s, the Cole's Funny Picture Book. But I won't go too deeply into it, but E.W. Cole was an innovator and a creative genius, where he was one of the first people that philanthropically, I should say, wanted to educate the masses, similar to Google. He believed in the right to education and the access to read content. And we're talking 1880s. And he created a brand and a bookstore that gave access to information and freedom through the ability to read and understand. And he challenged people. Now, brands still can do that. Brands, I think Bupa are a good brand that aim to be ubiquitous, aim to be a cultural and, a health enabler. But what this guy did, he changed the rules. He took out creative advertising space. So he bought page and disguised that page in the newspaper as content and educated people with information that challenged them and drove them to his retail destinations by freaking them out, basically, and challenging their cultural values. And in that sense, he gave birth, in my mind, to early advertising. And yet, if you walk around and ask anyone in Melbourne where he hails from or where his business started, he was from Liverpool, I think, he's largely unknown. And that's a dying shame that his legacy is not one that we all praise. But that's a little bit of cheekiness on my part. I try to spruik E.W. Cole wherever I can because of the many benefits that he's brought, but the many people that don't know.
So what was this Chasing the Rainbow from Lisa Lang?
Yeah, Lisa Lang is an expert. I've read a few of her things on E.W. Cole, but she's obviously, like myself, very connected with the fact that he is such an incredible individual, yet he is a legacy, it's just dwindled away. And she's written a book. I forget who it's published by, but I would encourage anyone to pick it up just to see how he viewed the world, and if through sharing his legacy can educate people around that utopian view, albeit it was never perfect. We're talking 1880, so occasionally you hear him cite something crazy and something kooky about the role of women, but ultimately he got it right. He respected everybody as actual equals, and he took on a wife as a life partner, but a life business partner. He didn't want her to be shoved away in a corner somewhere cooking. He really wanted somebody to join his business empire. Right. And the way he went about that was sheer genius as well. So I don't want to talk too deeply into him because the book needs to be read.
Exactly. I will.
It needs to be researched.
Put the link to the book on the post so people can always click and find where to get the books. So
excellent.
Very much, Peter. Has been such a pleasure to talk to you and understand a lot more about customer experience and how data and analytics are shaping and are being used to take the customer experience to another level. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, mate. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed the discussion today. It's covered a lot of ground, and I hope it's challenged some people on some fronts, like I would have hoped, but I also hope it's been of practical use as well.
I'm sure it will. Thank you very much.
Thank you, mate. I'll speak to you soon.